All right, hello and welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast number 63. Once a week, I'm going to have Glen Birnbaum here with me. He's going to come on once a week and kind of give a tax tip of the week. And last time I had him on, we did a section on some different tax revisions that were in the new tax bill, and we spent some time on Section 199A. And as we talked about in that last podcast, there were going to be some proposed revisions that were going to come up, and it looks like those revisions are going to be hooked to the omnibus bill that is going to come up for vote, or be presented this week and come up for vote, hopefully this week before they shut down the government again. So, Glenn, last time we were on, we talked about 199 and some links. So why don't you give us just a quick revision of what Section 199A is and how it affects the ag market?
Yeah, Casey, and thanks for being on. Excited to be able to do this once a week as we have tax tips. So today, there's some news that hopefully there's going to be some action actually happening this week. But just as a reminder, what was 199A about? Well, there's basically a difference under the current law, so the law that exists right now. If I'm a farmer, I'm a non-C corporation in this case, so we're talking about taxpayers other than C corporations. If I sell to a co-op, there's a certain type of treatment versus if I sell to a private grain elevator, there's a different type of treatment. So the first thing is, if I sell to a co-op, I get this 20% deduction on my gross sales, versus if I sell to a private elevator, it's on 20% of my net income. So that's a big difference. Second point is that the overall limitation, if I sell to a co-op, is 100% of my taxable income, versus if I sell to a private grain elevator, I can only reduce 20% of my taxable income. So there's another big difference right there. The third difference is that if I sell to a co-op, there are no wage or property kind of restrictions because it's just simpler if I sell to a co-op versus if I sell to a private elevator, potentially wages that I pay on my farm matter and property. So there's really three things that are causing this issue, and it's currently more advantageous to sell to a co-op than it is a private elevator.
Okay. So with the proposed plans that were coming, because obviously I'm sure this wasn't something that was written into the bill that they were like, we're gonna favor the co-ops. It was just one of those unforeseen things that allegedly unforeseen things that popped into the tax code. So with the revisions that are coming up, and obviously if they pass the omnibus bill and it's tied to that, they're going to pass these revisions. So what kind of information do you have about the proposed revisions that are going to come along with this new 199A?
Yeah, and there was a late last week. They issued about a half-page summary, but I've actually seen the what I believe is going to be the proposed bill text, and there's really 4 fixes to this. So the first fix is that it's going to be net income in both situations. So we'll take 20%, but it's going to be net for both situations. So whether I sell to a co-op or a private elevator, the deduction will be 20%. That's the starting point. The second fix is that it's going to be limited to 20% of taxable income at the individual level. So before, if you remember the co-op, it was limited to 100% of taxable income. So the big thing there was that I could offset off-farm income if I sold grain to a co-op. So again, that's no more. It's going to be 20% of taxable income in both situations. So that's the first two. Fix 3 and 4, this is where it gets more complicated. It relies on some of the old Section 199 rules that were repealed last December. So for the co-ops, we're going to go back to the old 199 rules where basically it's kind of complicated, but they got a 9% deduction. We're talking about the co-op specifically here. And then in certain circumstances, the co-op could elect, if they couldn't use it, they could pass out some of that deduction out to the farmers directly, and it would show up on a 1099 patronage form, box 6. So it's kind of going back to the way it was for the co-ops. So that's fix 3. Now fix 4 is where it gets really complicated. Basically, if a farmer sells to a co-op, they start with that 20% of net income as their deduction, but potentially they can get 9% of that taken away. And so in a worst case scenario, I get only 11% as my deduction. I'm talking off of my Schedule F income if I sell to a co-op. The idea being that that's kind of the way the rules were before with the 9%. So we're calling it here at the office the deduction and reductions. So if I sell to a co-op, I start at 20%, but I have the potential to get some of that pulled away, versus if I go back and I just sell to a private grain elevator, I'm going to start at 20% and there's no reduction. So what this really means, we've been thinking a lot about it here at the office, is that the co-ops probably are going to be asked questions about how much of this deduction are you going to pass back out to me, because potentially I may only get an 11% deduction directly. Now, I've got one other simplification that I want to talk about after what I just said. Does that make sense so far, Casey?
Oh yeah,
As much as it can.
I'm all over it, man.
Yeah. So here's the big picture situation though. If I'm a farmer and I have less than $315,000 of taxable income, I'm talking, married couple, so less than $315,000 of taxable income, and I pay little or no wages on my Schedule F, which, that covers a lot of farmers, right? You don't have a lot of wages. You're really going to get this 20% of net income deduction, whether you sell to a co-op or a private elevator. So it only really gets complicated if you're above that $315,000 taxable income number and you have wages. Then you may only get that 11%. So again, for most farmers, certainly you got to look at your own situation, but it can be as simple as it's basically 20%, 20% either way. And that's, again, what's in this proposed fix that we expect will be attached and released tonight with the omnibus spending bill and voted on probably as late as Friday by the Senate, because that'll be the last body to vote on it.
Yeah. Okay. So anything else as part of that you think that is kind of some meat and potatoes of some other things out there as part of that, some of that tax reform stuff that we should be aware of?
I think that's, I think it's just going to bring a lot of light to this difference, and I think, again, co-ops will probably get some more questions about, how much of this domestic production activity deduction will they pass out. So, but no, this is I think complicated enough. It will be retroactive back to January 1st. I should mention that.
Okay.
So, and in theory, this fix that most people thought was necessary because it was an unintended consequence is going to get rectified. It should get passed, and we'll kind of go back to normal, economics of who I want to sell my grain to, not what the tax code gives me as a benefit. So,
right on. Well, that was, guess, a good while it lasted.
Yeah, good while it lasted. Again, if this omnibus spending bill doesn't pass, it'll get deferred again. But I think we're hopeful that it'll get attached. And if it doesn't pass, it won't be because of the grain modification. It'll be for some other reason. There's immigration things and a whole lot of other spending, tunnels and things that could be a sticking point. But the grain glitch will appear to be part of the bill that'll be released later tonight.
Right on. Yeah, I would imagine that there's probably a pretty good push to get this passed, since it's tied to the government's,
the government will shut down on Friday if not, so hopefully this will all work out. So
okay, good deal. Well, Glenn, if guys want to get a hold of you or read some of your information, where's the best place for them to find that at?
On Twitter it's at Glen Birnbaum. Phone number is 309-694-4251. So.
Okay. All right, Glenn. Well, thanks for being on, and we'll look forward to next week's tax tip.
All right. Thanks, Casey.
Thanks, buddy.